So we were talking about live services the other day and how the market is oversaturated and new ideas seem to be lacking. A lot of the live services that we're seeing pushed out just feel kind of uninspired, chasing trends. Just it feels like they're trying to cash in rather than kind of use the genre to create something genuinely innovative and something that pushes the genre to a new level and to new heights. It all just feels iterative instead of innovative. And so that's led to a situation where there's just too many live services out there right now. And the majority of the ones that attempt to kind of get a piece of the pie and tap into this oversaturated market end up shutting down unceremoniously. I talked about how that happened to Exoprimal. I talked about how Multiverses is well on its way towards a mass decline that's going to see potentially its shutdown, especially for a free-to-play game. These numbers are just not enough. Then we got Skull and Bones, which didn't break 1 million players after February 22nd, 2024. I don't know what those numbers look like now, but I don't imagine this is a game that's performing particularly well. Arcane Austin had to shut down Redfall, and the studio itself was shut down by Xbox. You've got Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which is well on its way out, and things are bad enough where they're trying to give this game away for free in the hopes that people come back. But you look at the player numbers, it's just, low triple digits, nowhere near enough to sustain this live service. You've got Foam Stars, which crashed pretty quickly and lost 95% of its player base in a short amount of time. This game's on its way out for sure. Rocket Arena shut down earlier this year. You've got this shooter from Tencent called Synced, which I'd never even heard about before, but it shut down exactly a year after its launch. So on and so forth. You get the idea. And now it seems as though live services are saying, I've got one more in me, in the form of Concord, which is the PlayStation published live service. For those who don't know, PlayStation's trying to delve deep into making a bunch of live services. Too many. At one point, they had 12 that they were planning to release by 2026. That number has been reduced to 6, but that's still too many. Among them is Concord, which is basically this hero shooter that is essentially Overwatch with hints of Destiny and Guardians of the Galaxy in terms of its aesthetic. And the game doesn't look awful by any means. It plays fine and, it does the thing, but it doesn't do anything to stand out either. And that's kind of what the general consensus has been. There's one article here from Washington Post that best describes this as this being a game that's a few years too late. Maybe it would have enticed folks if it would have released before some of the other hero shooters became standard. But now Concord is just coming in late to the party, and it's a game that nobody is really particularly interested in. And that's leading to a result that is less than ideal when you look at player numbers right now. So for those who don't know, Concord had a closed beta not too long ago, and you can see right here the numbers there are pretty paltry. But you could potentially argue, well, you have to pre-order the game to access the closed beta, and so numbers would be low. But even then, despite this being closed beta, the numbers were so abysmal that you have to wonder how many people actually pre-order this game. But the real test lies in what is now the open beta. The numbers that we're seeing right here represented are those of the open beta. Keep in mind that Concord is going to be $40 when it launches. And so if the free trial, if you will, of this game can't draw in an audience, can you imagine this game doing any sort of major moves and pushing a lot of units and being a financial success when it launches? So the numbers in the open beta look as follows. It peaked at a mere 2,388 players. And we are seeing the beta still run, and in that time, the 24-hour peak sits in the average of roughly like 1,500, 1,600 players. This is a minuscule number of players for a game that is this major AAA live service that Sony is pushing significantly that is free to access right now. I've seen other betas or early access periods where the game is free. And hell, I've seen even some early access periods where they charge money for it, where the numbers have been significantly higher than this, indicating that there is some semblance of excitement, that there is some semblance of hype for the title. But in the case of Concord, I don't know if it's just a case of people not knowing that this game exists or them knowing that it exists, but being so uninterested by it that they decided to skip it. But these numbers are indicative of a game that I think will kind of be dead on arrival. And keep in mind that Concord is going to have to compete with the likes of Overwatch 2, which despite all the, criticism surrounding it, it still gets tons of players. We still get 24-hour peaks in the 50-some thousand players. And this is just Steam, by the way. We probably are seeing much greater numbers if we combine Steam numbers with the Battle.net numbers. Destiny 2 is still seeing, 80,000 players every day, 70, 80,000 roughly there. Somebody even highlighted the rather sad fact that Valve's unannounced game Deadlock has more players than Concord. I've never even heard about Deadlock until I looked into this news. And yeah, looking at the numbers here, it has a higher all-time peak number than frickin' Concord, which is a game that is a couple weeks away. It comes out later in August, and the numbers here for open beta, this is a really bad sign, ladies and gentlemen. Like, no live service can sustain itself with these kinds of numbers. And if the free access period is getting such low numbers, I don't know if the final release will see numbers that will be able to sustain Concord and not have it suffer the same fate as the likes of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League or, Marvel's Avengers, you name it. And keep in mind that even if Concord gets 10 times the players at launch, it's still going to be in a dangerous all-time peak range where it might peter out and die off. Like, even if we multiply this all-time peak by 10, it's not as high as Marvel's Avengers all-time peak of 31,165 players. And Marvel's Avengers is a game that eventually petered out and died off. So if Concord can't even break past Marvel's Avengers numbers, even if if it gets 10 times the players at launch, which again costs $40 compared to this free-to-access open beta, then I don't know that Concord can survive in the long term. I'm even wondering if it can reach the all-time peaks of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which peaked at a rather abysmal 13,459 players, and its kind of average player base was not particularly high throughout its lifespan, which is just not great numbers for a high-budget AAA game. I don't know that Concord is quite as high budget as Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, but it is a game that the folks at Sony and PlayStation and the studio that's working on it will have to maintain consistently. It is going to be an investment that doesn't feel like it's going to pay itself back. And the issue lies in the fact that Concord is just kind of generic. It's not that it's all bad. Again, like, it's not an awful game. And there are some good attributes to it. I think visually, in terms of fidelity, there's they got some good stuff going on in terms of the graphics and some of the art style elements going on here. And the individual heroes, a lot of them do have some unique play styles and powers, and the gameplay is solid. And it's not a game that feels bad to play or anything. You can have some fun with it. It's just there games of this genre out there that are more established, that are better, that have a better player base, that are more fleshed out, that have been at it for longer and are more feature complete. Concord, especially for its $40 asking price, just doesn't feel like it's doing enough to stand out from the pack or for it to justify its $40 price point when Overwatch 2 is free to play. So for Concord to charge that premium price point of $40, it really has to go above and beyond to be able to compete with all the free-to-play stuff that's out there. And I think that's a big mistake for them to not go free-to-play with this, to charge $40 if what they have on offer is kind of what's being presented right now, which is not a whole lot compared to what other games of this genre are doing. Now, we don't know what the PlayStation numbers look like. This game is coming out on both PC and PlayStation, and by some miracle, it may very well be that the level of engagement of this game on PlayStation is significantly higher. But what I usually discover is that if a game is performing well on one platform, it'll perform well on the other platform as well. If people want to play a certain game, they will play it across both platforms. You've got both audiences who will tune in and engage with the game. If you ask me, the fact that Concord is seeing such abysmal numbers during its open beta indicates to me that even on PlayStation, it's, maybe has higher numbers, but probably not by a whole lot, not enough to make a difference in terms of its future prospects as a long-term, as a viable live service. that can attract enough players and have them spend enough money for this to be a worthwhile venture. I would not be shocked if Concord was dead on arrival. I would not be shocked if its initial player numbers indicated a live service that Sony and PlayStation will not want to support for more than a year, maybe 2 tops if it gets lucky. But who knows? We have seen plenty of comebacks and plot twists happen in the past, and by some miracle they can make that happen with this game. Great. But as I said before, the oversaturation of this market is becoming harder and harder to deal with. The more you go in making a live service game with the mindset of like cashing in on a certain genre and a certain trend, the less likely it is that you'll succeed. Like only a few of those kind of break through. There are only so many gamers in the world. They only have so much time and money. We keep shoving in live services into the market and hoping that all of them will garner the kind of audience that Destiny, Fortnite, Apex Legends, whatever Overwatch does. That's just not a viable strategy. The expectation of infinite growth is absolutely ridiculous and short-sighted. And the fact that even with this trend of so many live services dying off and being a huge waste of time and resources, despite all that, seeing Sony confirm, initially planning 12 live services by the end of March 2026 and saying that we'll just cut that down to 6 still being a lot. The fact that they're planning 6 live services from one company within the span of 2 years, like good luck on the money you're about to throw away. Maybe one of those will pop off, and maybe that's what they're riding on, because if one of them pops off at the level that, something like Fortnite does, then it'll pay itself back 1,000-fold. So maybe that's what they're betting on, that eventually they'll hit the bullseye after investing too much money on too many live services. Maybe one of them will become the next Fortnite, the next Destiny, whatever, and pay dividends and make them a ton of money over the long term. But, that's a risky proposition, and there's going to be a lot of wasted potential and a lot of likely layoffs as the devs get blamed for the failures of leadership and their mandates for the kinds of games that they want to ship instead of letting the developers cook what they should be cooking. But I suppose only time will tell how Concord will play out. At the end of the day, we don't know for sure. My prediction is, though, that Concord will not last very long at all. Like, I've seen this trend before. I've covered enough live services to know that unless there's a major miracle or crazy comeback that happens, which is the exception, not the rule, Concord, I think, is just, it's doomed to repeat history. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Concord. Have you played the game and the beta? What do you think of it? And do you think it has the potential for long-term viability? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.